SOS, SOS, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Australia and New Zealand. SOS. They are bringing down the Commonwealth as we speak. If you keep watching my videos, you're going to see that they're going to make an attempt to transfer the power from the British Majesty and the 1688 Bill of Rights to other kings in other parts of the world, and we think that those parts of the world are over on the islands and the country of New Zealand. Now they're going to be making a series of videos to show you the process of how they're doing that. Now I do want to show you something here on the 1688 Bill of Rights that I keep talking to all of you about. Now the 1688 Bill of Rights, the Will and Mary version, is in New Zealand legislation. And the important thing about the 1688 Bill of Rights that I'll just show you, Kim's with us today, but Kim knows about the 1688 Bill of Rights already. So in this 1688 Bill of Rights, it clearly says that whom it has pleased Almighty God, the Prince and Princess of Orange, whom it has pleased Almighty God to make the glorious instrument of delivering this kingdom from popery and arbitrary power. Now, the essence of this 1688 Bill of Rights, the absolute essence, was that not only the Catholic Church, but any other churches, Islamic churches, Jewish churches, Anglican churches, any of the higher church would no longer be permitted to govern over the people because they couldn't stop fighting amongst themselves. Now, the key point, so they're trying to force us through the United Nations to take on this freedom of religion. And what they're doing is they're dismantling the separation of church and state, where our ancestors fought for 400 years to stop the religious leaders from governing with arbitrary power, ecclesiastical courts, and cruel and unusual punishments that they were deciding for the people. Now, the people of Germany and the people of England, Scotland, Ireland rose up, fought all of these people, and brought in the 1688 Bill of Rights, separation of church and state. The key points were in the supremacy law. The supremacy law forbid foreigners to govern in our parliament, and it forbid any religious leaders from governing over us. That was the key point. And then later on they had papers debarred from the Crown and various other laws that they had to follow in order that we could have our elections. And all our elections are based on these restrictions of Parliament and Church. What they're doing now is dismantling this process and bringing in United Nations laws into our countries. And we want to show you the process in New Zealand of how they're doing it in New Zealand. Now, we did, so you're going to, what they're doing is replacing the British Majesty so that they can replace it with a new king around, well, actually a couple of kings, perhaps even 3 kings. I'm thinking there are going to be 3 kings, and it's all going on around New Zealand, the islands, and Hawaii. And we know that America has got their dirty little fingers in this pie. You'll have to wait for that video. Last week or the other day, we did a video with Kim, and it explained the Declaration of Independence that was written by the chiefs and with the British resident James Busby in 1835. Today we're going to go to the next step, which was called the between 1835 and 1840, on January the 14th of 1840, British law and the Majesty's law came to power in New Zealand. But in February the 6th of 1840, a treaty was signed, and in that treaty, an offer was made to the New Zealand natives if they would like to be subjects of the Majesty. Later on in 1865, they went to the court and declared themselves subjects of the Majesty, and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II officially adopted the New Zealand Maori as subjects of the Queen. And as we saw in the video that we did last week, the word subject and the words, various different words, were removed from the Declaration of Independence with a new rewrite in 1975, backed by the Pope of Manuka Hanari. Now we went on to there, and we're going to do this treaty today. So everyone will have to stay. We're not going to the Bill of Rights. We're not doing that. We're going to do the treaty. So all you do is you type in Treaty of Waitangi. Type that into your Google. And then don't go to Wikipedia. Go down. And you always go to the one that says Archives. This is the one where you want to go, Archives Government New Zealand. And then it will come up there and you'll see the purple here, which shows you the various different versions. And then you open up another one. Now these are not, it's not good to view this on telephones. You've really got to be viewing this on a computer. So where's my archives? Go to your archives. And, oh, yes. All right, introductions to Kim, who I've forgotten there. Okay, Kim, you're back with us. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, Kate. Hello, Kate's followers. Yes, it is me. We're going to talk about the Treaty of Waitangi. It's very interesting. I'm finding it exciting learning this as we go along. And there, one of the ways that I find is easiest if we are having problems with our computer lagging or our phone is too small, the print is too small, print it out. Print both versions out so then you can follow the information that we're talking about. Because when you start following this sort of trail, it leads to bigger and better understanding of what actually is going on. So back to you, Kate. Let's go.
Thank you. So just for those people in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland and Australia.
Sorry, can I just interject, Jane?
Yes, dear.
That's Scotland. Could you just take out a tea next time you do it, darling?
Oh, I've been using this sign for so long.
I know, but it's driving me nuts. It's my OCD. There is only one tea in Scotland. There's only one tea.
Sorry, Scotland. I'm going to go and fix that. Is there any other spelling mistakes? All right, then everyone keep a check on my spelling. We all know my spelling's not that great. Now, these countries here, you might be thinking that this has nothing to do with you, but anything to do with the 1688 Bill of Rights is to do with all of our countries. And we have been complacent, and it starts in New Zealand. Now, what I will say about Australia, we're not going to do it today, but Australia has removed half of the 1688 Bill of Rights. England is attempting to remove half of theirs, and I think New Zealand will remove half of theirs. The part that they're removing is the popery and arbitrary power. Popery and religious leaders governing over us, that's been removed. So we have to show you the process of that. So we've got here, so everybody needs to, doesn't matter what country you're from, if you're in the Commonwealth, you need to be watching this. All right. So the English version will open up the English version, which is going to go on the left. And then we're going to open up the Te Reo version, English translation. Now, this was also done by Manuka Hanari, and it was done together with a man called Hugh Kafaru. Now, they did this together. It's all been done in the Victoria University is where it's been done. And we've got a lot to talk about with the people that are writing all the laws in Victoria University because they're all very suspicious as well. There's a lot of skullduggery going on in New Zealand. Oh dear, I've done something here. There's a lot of skullduggery going on in New Zealand and Australia and Scotland, Northern Ireland, and we've got to work hard and study hard. They're about 40 years ahead of all of us, and so we know that America is heavily involved with all of this. So we've all got to work very hard to get this. Just setting up my thing here, Kim.
That's all right.
To make it so that they can see. All right, so we're going to start. The place that takes quite a lot of work and the place that everybody skips is the preamble. Okay, so the preamble is key. This was also done between the years of the Declaration of Independence was changed between the years of 1975 and 1986, where they removed our 1852 Constitution. The Constitution was also removed in Australia, Canada and England, and I assume Scotland and Ireland as well. But all of the other countries had their constitutions replaced, except for New Zealand, England and Israel, who all kept unwritten constitution, whatever that means. Now, this is when the corporation came into being. It was through this translation of the Treaty of Waitangi. If you look here on the left in the English version, it says, Her Majesty Victoria, Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, regarding her royal favour. So there's the first point that we want to make. Now, if you look there, so we can highlight that. If you look there on the translation, it just says, Victoria, the Queen of England. And it's left out Great Britain. It's left out United Kingdom. It's left out Great Britain. And it's left out Ireland. And it's left out the main point that we discussed in the last video is that Queen can mean anything. All right? And Queen can mean anything.
It's got to have the word majesty.
It's got to have the word majesty. Majesty is key because that means that the majesty is all the sovereigns, which is us in each of our countries, that place, all of us place our single sovereign into the hands of our chiefs, and our chiefs place the sovereign of each of their tribes into the basket of the majesty, who the majesty sits with the Queen, and she is the majesty of all of our countries that holds up the 1688 Bill of Rights. But here it says Majesty Victoria Queen. You'll see that they've put Victoria and Queen together, right? Similar to like a first name and a last name. But here they've separated it. They've put Victoria, the Queen of England. Now, the Queen can mean many, many different things. You can even have the Queen of a rock group. It can mean many things. Very different from Her Majesty Victoria Queen. So that is significant. And the other countries have been excluded, right? And then it's also the word royal has been removed. And then here once again, they've changed native chiefs of New Zealand, and they've replaced it just with chiefs and sub-tribes of New Zealand. And it says that in regard with her royal favour, the native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand and ancient, listen here to what it says. On the English version, this is called I would call this the Hobson version and the Kafaru version. So on the Hobson version, it says, native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand and anxious to protect their just rights and property. And the new one says, in concern to protect the chiefs and sub-tribes of New Zealand, and in her desire to preserve their chieftainship and their lands to them. Okay? So it's very different.
So native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand, anxious to protect their just rights and property, have been minimalised to her desire to preserve their chieftainship.
Yes.
That's a huge change.
Yes, because it's, and it just says lands. And it's not saying...
And their land.
Yeah, and it's not saying their property.
No, it doesn't say their rights either.
And no, it doesn't.
Diminished as well.
Gone. And she uses, Her Majesty uses rights and property. Well, that comes under the 1688 Bill of Rights here. I'll better put it up. I'll put that up because that is, there's a reason for that. Eh?
Is that because, again, that's following Prince William and Mary of Orange and common law practice?
Yes, because that comes under, hang on, I'll do that. That comes under grants of forfeitures, and forfeitures of particular persons before conviction are illegal and void, which means that they cannot take your land without any conviction that it isn't your land. So that is in your rights. And so forfeiture of person is a protection of your lands. And then she says here, protect their just rights and property. And that's where the property comes under the 1688, to protect your property that belongs to each individual chief, native chief, and their tribe, because it does say here, and their tribe. So that's why that is significant that it's written the way that it's written.
Yes, because it's actually saying the native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand, and anxious to protect their just rights and property. Whereas when you go across to the altered one, all we get is the chiefs and sub-tribes of New Zealand. So we're no longer talking about native chiefs. We're talking about anyone who wants to be a leader of New Zealand, and who desire to preserve their chieftainship and lands. So she's not even now, we're not even now talking about their rights or their property, as Kate's explained. We're only talking about their leadership and their land. Yes,
it's talking about leadership of their lands, not talking about their ownership of their lands.
No, they're not talking about who actually has that pure title. They're now talking about any title. So they're making it a commonality.
And what they're basically saying is that the people that are in New Zealand now can have some governance of their lands, but it doesn't recognise that they have rights to their own property.
And that's because, again, they're moving us out of status of subject back to status of Pākehā, which was explained in the He Whakaputanga Declaration of New Zealand. So if you've missed that, that's important to go back and understand, because this will start to make more sense.
And to a place in time where land belonged to nobody. And
correct, because under God's will, we were born with nothing, we leave with nothing, and we're here in the duration to care for the land and the sea and the ocean for the future generations. Because remember, under Māoridom, it's kaitiaki, which is guardianship.
Well, you do
protect and caretake.
You do have to be careful, because when they lived with no private ownership under the religious leaders for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it didn't work out, because you should remember with that all of the tribes people have no rights to any of the land or the governorship of it. So be careful about that. It sounds exciting that the Maori will be the caretakers of all the land, but in actual fact, if you go back to that point in time, none of the tribal people are entitled to any ownership of that land, because it only belongs in the hands of the paramount chiefs. So that's what, when the Queen comes, she changed all that, and she said, no, each person on that land has a stake in that land. Each person has a say and is entitled to some ownership of that land. So just be careful about that. Kaitiaki sounds very lovely in its fairy tale version. But in truth...
Well, fairy tale or not, it's about caretaking of land. And at the end of the day, I am under strong belief and understanding that nobody actually owns any land. Nobody. It doesn't matter who they are.
No, well, they don't. That is a fact. Well, let's, all right, we'll have this talk about another time maybe. But anyway, it's just significant that we have rights to private property nowadays, and previously they didn't. And what they've gone back to is that the Majesty said that native chiefs and tribes, each tribal member would have rights to private property as well. And what she says now is, and they will only have governorship over their lands, which doesn't mean any ownership.
She also goes on to say, and to secure to them the enjoyment of peace and good order, which is the next part that they've also changed, Kate.
Yes. Okay, let's go on to the next part. Very good, Kim. As Kim says, it says, and to secure them the enjoyment of peace and good order as it deemed necessary in consequence of Her Majesty's subjects who have already settled in New Zealand. It's hard to read this because they don't put any full stops. It's a single thing. So
it's
that's
like one running board. But what they've replaced that with is, and to maintain. So they've taken out secure, peace and good chieftainship. So they've taken out good order and their lands to them. So you've got to really be careful what you're watching because they really do go all over the place. So then they go, consents it just to appoint an administrator, one who will negotiate with the people of New Zealand. So what Kate has read and what I've just read, it's almost like two different, completely different interpretations of something. One holds weight, Kate's holds weight, mine does not.
Yeah, with these, every single word is important. What they have done is, I had explained it in another video. It says to secure them the enjoyment of peace and good order, and has deemed it. Now, deemed comes from the 1688 Bill of Rights, and they use it in the subjects' liberties to be allowed of indubitable rights. And whenever they use this word deemed, it means that all officers and all ministers and anyone that's controlling over the country has to stand down and recognise these rights. And they use this word deemed and taken to be. And it's a very, very, very important word. And deemed has been removed. And she says, and deemed it necessary in consequence of the great Majesty's subjects who have already settled. Yes. Now, this comes under that Britain, whenever their subjects of a fair size of people went out into the world, the Majesty was bound to protect them even if they were in other countries. And as you saw that in the Declaration of Independence, the chiefs had recognised the subject status. Well, what they have done in this section is they've changed it to be, and maintain peace in the Kafaru, maintain peace and good order, considers it just to appoint an administrator, one who will negotiate with the people of New Zealand. So they've removed the word subjects and they've changed it to be people of New Zealand. And they did that so that it would include all of the 2 million immigrants that have been imported into New Zealand over the last 10 years. So
and
that's...
again, that comes back to the word subject.
Yeah, and so
subject is,
it's key.
Okay.
So that has been removed, and then they've replaced it with people of New Zealand. And then they've added...
And they took out Majesty again, Kate.
Yes, to the end the chiefs will agree to the... They've put Queen's government, and Her Majesty have put Her Majesty's subjects. Yes, Her Majesty which is talking about Her Majesty the Queen of England. They've changed that to be Queen's government. And the Queen is not permitted to govern over, to
And
govern.
she doesn't have the highest authority either.
No, she actually doesn't.
Without the majesty in front
Yeah.
of the king or the queen,
Yeah.
they are no longer the highest authority.
Yeah.
And that's really important too.
That is very key. And then they say in the Kafaru version, being established over all parts of this land and adjoining islands. And also because there are many of her subjects already living on this land and others yet to come. Well, it's very significant in the way that there's written, because in the Hobson version it uses Her Majesty's subjects, and what they have done in the Kamfaru version is separated the word subject from Queen of Government, which it's the subjects can be anyone. Now,
and they've also made it so that by turning around and saying it's established over all parts of the land to anyone, saying anyone who comes in, or anyone who's about to come in, whereas in the original Hobson Treaty, it states who have already settled in New Zealand.
Yes, I haven't picked that up, but that's exactly correct. Because they're trying to say that the Treaty of Waitangi is for all people coming to New Zealand even now, but it actually is not true.
Because other people coming from other countries at the moment are refugees, and refugees have no status as subjects of this country. And that's what you need to understand. So these subtleties, these subtle changes that they have made aren't subtle at all. They're actually huge.
And they're deliberate.
Because it disempowers us, the actual true subjects of New Zealand.
Yes.
And gives more power to the foreigner.
Yes.
Who has no claim to our country land.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. That is exactly correct. They have given the power to the 2.5 million immigrants and refugees that they have imported in a speedy thing that they've done over the last 10 years, and they have given power to them. Yes, that's exactly right, Kim, and they come under Islamic laws and Judaist laws, not Protestant law.
They do not hold our cultural considerations. They do not hold the loyalty of what we as New Zealanders live by and respect. They bring their tone into our country, and then they get more power than us, the subjects of this country. Because it's really important. You need to understand, we the subjects have become disempowered.
Yes.
And the foreigners have become empowered.
Yes. And 60% of our parliament have been filled with foreign people that do not hold subject status.
Hello. Yet those very people who are now sitting in our government have access to our land and are able to buy our land, which, as Kate is about to reveal, is quite significant because it leaves us landless.
Yes. And then it said what he's done in this preamble is he has separated. See, our preamble is quite long, and he
very short.
Yeah, and he has put some places. I did do a video about it. He has put some places up the top, which in the Hobson version are at the bottom. And then he's mixed it all up, so that's why it's quite hard to read. But it's...
So, for example, you've got chieftains in the Hobson, but in the the other one, the milky version,
Yeah.
you just have leaders, chiefs. You don't have the separation, the identification of the native chiefs of tribes.
Yes.
Or the hereditary chiefs.
He
no longer have that.
he uses and their chiefs. He uses chieftainship and their chiefs, and he's removed tribes completely. So all of you people that are in the tribes are wondering why you've got no power. It's been removed, and they've only left chiefs. And so that is
like when they've gone to claim that land in the courts using the Treaty of Waitangi and whatever else they're using in whakaputanga. And when you get those big, huge payouts, and all of us are sitting there waiting to get our portion of it, and we never see it, that's because the owners of that land now are no longer us, the subjects. It is now the Pākehā.
No, it's not. It's not the Pākehā. It is the chiefs and the absolute kings, and the tribes have been removed. So they use the tribes to get the protests and to get the cases into the court. But when they win the case, the only people that win are the chiefs and the kings, and the tribes are removed.
I was getting confused with the subjects being taken out and whakaputanga to become Pākehā so that they get the pure title rather than paper title that we were discussing in the other one.
That pure title goes back to the native kings and paramount chiefs. That's why.
The other ones that are lining their pockets.
Yes, and the tribes have been removed, and you can see why. And
yes, you can see why.
And then he says, being established over all parts of the land and adjoining islands. Well, this could include the Pacific Island. Now, where it talks about New Zealand on here, you have to go right down to the bottom where it says Lieutenant Governor of such parts of New Zealand as may be or hereafter shall be ceded to Her Majesty.
Well, that's the same as what they say in that part that you just read, where subjects already living on this land, you said, but it also states, and others yet to come. So when they talk about us grouped in with the islands, you know how you mentioned the islands, Kate?
Yeah.
There are others yet to come.
Because it says there, immigration both from Europe and Australia. It's talking about subjects, and it's clear about who it's talking about. It's talking about the subjects from Europe and Australia, because the islands each got their own constitution from the Queen. They all negotiated separately, and each of those islands own their own individual countries. But what they're trying to do is muscle in and be part of the New Zealand claim of the New Zealand native chiefs and native tribes. This is where you get yourself into trouble, because each of those islands have their own treaty with the Majesty and their own constitution with the Majesty, and no New Zealand Maori are allowed to be included in that, nor are any islands permitted to be included in each other's islands. However, what they're trying to do is connect all of those islands to New Zealand and give all of them rights to the New Zealand lands and the New Zealand constitutions. So
yeah,
this
so
is...
That's the Hugh Whariaro, isn't it?
That's Hugh Kafaru. Hugh Kafaru. So,
okay.
Yeah, so this is quite...
The one that's adjoining islands.
Yeah, we can spend a whole session just on the preamble. But so then they've used all of parts of this land and adjoining islands, but actually each part of New Zealand had a different treaty, and it was only such parts of New Zealand as thereafter were ceded. And I can tell you, because I have the evidence, not every part of New Zealand or every part of the islands was ceded. There was one New Zealand Maori tribe that did not cede the governance, and I've got the constitution of that tribe, and I'm not going to talk about it today. But I will tell you, so he said all of the parts, and also because there are many of her subjects already living on this land and others yet to come. Well, he has said that, but he has separated from Her Majesty's subjects because I'm going to do it in the next video, but
he's moved out Majesty and he's put it down as just Queen's government.
There are different countries around the world that have subjects that are not necessarily Her Majesty the Queen of England's subjects. So we all think the only subjects that exist are subjects of Her Majesty's the Queen, but each country that has a king, all of their people are deemed to be subjects of that king and his laws or her laws. So when they remove Her Majesty's subjects like that are used with Her Majesty Victoria, Queen of the United Kingdom, and then they use Her Majesty's subjects. Here, where they just put her subjects, it could actually be talking about any subjects of any queen of any country in the world. So it's not talking about the English Queen's subjects. So that is significant.
So in the Hobson one,
yes,
a big part of this is what we're talking about is the Hobson one as opposed to the other one. They've cut out a huge portion, and part of that huge portion they've cut out is laws and institutions alike to the native population and to his subjects has been graciously pledged to empower and to authorise William Hobson, a captain in Her Majesty's Royal Navy, consul and lieutenant governor of such parts of New Zealand, as may be or hereafter shall be ceded to Her Majesty to invite the Confederate and Independent Chiefs of New Zealand to concur in the following articles and conditions. They've totally taken that out and replaced it with being established over all parts of this land and adjoining islands. So can you see the different tone? There is more precedence in the Hobson to protect us as subjects, whereas in the second, it becomes very overviewed to the point where now we're inviting all other parts of this land and adjoining islands, and also because there are many of her subjects already living here but have yet to come. So when they say others yet to come, you have to identify the number of refugees into our country in the last 3-4 decades, because that would follow through with what's being said here by Hugh Kawhiro.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where I did the Kawhiro translation. I'll just have a look here. I did actually show the differences.
When you're looking at this, when you guys out there go and print this off and have a look and compare the two, make the two comparisons sitting in front of you, you are going to see very clearly there is a more detailed understanding of the treaty under Hobson to where it's a watered down version that's almost being created so that anybody who doesn't have an understanding of our culture could understand this one.
Can you see my screen there, Kim?
Yes, I can.
Right, this is more clear here. All right, so I'll show you how they've done it. So on the Kawhiro version, so can you see my screen? On the left is Kawhiro and on the right is Hobson. And I'll just go through it. On the Kawhiro version, it says Victoria, the Queen of England. And on the Hobson version, it says Her Majesty Victoria, Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. On the
It tells
Kamwhara,
the full title.
yes. And then in the Kamwhara it says, in her concern to protect the chiefs and the sub-tribes of New Zealand. And here in the Hobson's version, it's got regarding with her royal favour the native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand, and anxious to protect their rights and property that we already talked about. And he's got, and in her desire to preserve their chieftainship on the Kawhara, their lands to them and maintain peace and order, considers it just to appoint an administrator. Now, this is very important. One who will negotiate with the people of New Zealand to the end how do I get back here? No. Oh, all right. How did I get back there? Oh, it's not working. Just a minute. How do I find my slides? And I've just lost it for a minute.
It's okay, Kate. Kate is such a researcher and has so much documentation that she has to scroll through that when doing these sorts of presentations, sometimes these little glitches happen. So you can be forgiven for that, Kate.
Thank you. All right, that's on. That's not on share screen, is it?
Not yet.
All right, I'll get back to share screen. And all right. Now you can see the share screen, right?
Yes.
All right. So I separated these into two parts of the preamble. And so it's got here
we can see you scrolling.
Yes, yeah, that's very good. So it's got here the Queen's government being established over all parts of the land, and because there are many of her subjects already living on and others yet to come, and then he's put the Hobson version says Her Majesty's subjects, which we've just talked about. But I want to go down to the bed.
You were talking about it was that they would administrate.
Yes,
It's,
administrator. Yes, I want to talk about administrator because what you'll see here is on the. I don't want to do that too much in case I get lost. Oh dear. Can you see me scrolling all this stuff I've got? It's just got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. All right, we're on here. All right, so on the Hobson version, it says a functionary properly authorised to treat with the Aborigines of New Zealand for the recognition of Her Majesty's sovereign authority. Now, first of all, I just want to say sovereign authority does not mean ownership of land or ownership of property. Sovereign authority just simply means a setting up of governance because they had no courts and they had no laws. And so the chiefs gave the authority to the Majesty to set up British law. And it clearly says that there. It says the sovereign authority. It doesn't say anything about ownership of property. Right?
No, and it actually says over the whole or any part of those islands.
Yes, it says over the whole or any part of those islands.
So Her Majesty the Sovereign Authority, it says the properly authorised to treat with Aborigines of New Zealand for the recognition of Her Majesty's sovereign authority over the whole or any part of those islands.
Yeah.
Her Majesty therefore being desirous to establish a settled form of civil government with a view to avert the evil consequences which must result from the absence of the necessary laws and institutions alike to the native population and to his subjects.
Yeah. And I want to point out an important piece where it says administrator. Administrator is very key to a functionary. If you would, I had it up here somewhere, if you were to go and research a functionary is a person that when you have no government in a country, a functionary will come in from a country that has established governance and courts, and they will set up a scaffolding in your country, and they will set up all of the ministries, a ministry of education, a ministry of justice, a ministry of councils. They set all of that up, and they're called functionaries. But once they have established all of these things, they are allowed to use, they're permitted to use the laws of their country temporarily. And then once all of these systems have been set up, then they take the scaffolding away, and then they hand that country back to the owners of the country to carry on with what has been set up. And this is what they did.
It has the influence of their country within what they've created.
Yeah, well, the tribes were not able to set up any form of governance because they all couldn't agree on who was going to lead. So they had to send in, and so this is what a functionary is, and a functionary has all the powers of the Majesty. They are literally a king being brought to your country temporarily to set up all of the functions that you need to run a country. And so, but they've given him the name as the Kafaro version has just said to appoint an administrator. All an administrator does is no different to a council officer in the local council. Very different.
Well, they just administrate. Administrators administrate. That's all they do.
Yes, exactly. And it says one who will negotiate with the people of the New Zealand to the end that their chiefs will agree to a Queen's government being established. Now, this is where they brought the corporation into New Zealand.
Because Queen's government is corporation.
Yeah.
Majesty, Queen Victoria, Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, is not.
Yeah. And the Majesty is under the restrictions of the 1688 Bill of Rights, where she is not permitted to interfere with the governance in the government of your country. But Queen's government is this Queen in right of New Zealand, the corporation. This is when it was set up. And they've just only got administrators, so they are appointing administrators, and the chiefs are agreeing to this corporation, this Queen's corporation. It was done here. And it says here that the functionary was only authorised to treat with the Aborigines of New Zealand for the recognition of Her Majesty's sovereign authority. That just meant that she had the authority to bring in the British law.
Exactly. She had the authority to act on their behalf, but she wasn't trying to take over like it is in the other one.
Yeah. And if you see in the second paragraph, the Hugh Kafaro version, yes. He said, so the Queen desires to establish a government. We don't know who this Queen is. That's the Queen in right of New Zealand, so that no evil will come to Maori and European living in a state of lawlessness. And what is happening in New Zealand? They have created a state of lawlessness. And so
Because they're being run by a queen.
They brought in this queen of corporation, and they needed to have, it's not finished, it's not done, Kim. They need to have a state of lawlessness so that they can bring in this corporation. And in 2020, they instituted American law, which is called the Nexus Lexus. And they said, and they brought in American law, and apparently I am told that they have already put us under the American Constitution outside of the British 1688 Bill of Rights. And so they need to create a state of lawlessness to do this, because they needed to say, under the British Majesty and under the 1688 Bill of Rights, New Zealand had fallen into a state of lawlessness. So therefore, to prevent that, they had to bring in this Queen in Right of New Zealand and the American Constitution to re-establish law in New Zealand. And that's why they're creating the chaos that they're creating. It's done on purpose. And so then Kafaru says, so the Queen has appointed me, William Hobson, a captain in the Royal Navy, to be governor for all parts of New Zealand. Now, you need to...
That's not true either, because again, taken out Her Majesty's Royal Navy.
Yes.
It's not just any navy, it's Her Majesty's Royal Navy.
Yes.
Consul and Lieutenant Governor, and it's Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've said in the Royal Navy to be governor.
They called him a captain. Yeah, and a captain is basically the lower captain that runs the crew. But Hobson was amounted to, he was, you could say that he actually was the Queen herself. And that's what, he was a consul. He, to authorise me, Hobson, a captain in Her Majesty's Royal Navy Consul, and Lieutenant Governor, a Lieutenant Governor and a Royal Navy Consul. So he was the captain of the ship, but he also was Her Majesty's Royal Navy Consul, where Her Majesty's power went with him on that ship.
He actually held 3 hats.
Yes.
He held the hat of captain, he held the hat of Her Majesty's Royal Navy Consul,
yes.
He held the hat of Lieutenant Governor, interim, whilst he was acting on her behalf.
And then, but in Kafaru's version, it just says, has appointed me, William Hobson. Do you see how, and then she still puts a captain, but then he puts in the Royal Navy. He's used that instead of Her Majesty. And then it's put to be governor. And Lieutenant Governor is
higher than governor, and then you've got general governor. Governor for all parts of New Zealand, and Lieutenant Governor on the original Hobson was Lieutenant Governor of such parts of New Zealand as may be or hereafter shall be ceded to Her Majesty to invite, and it carries on. But here they're diminishing him down to ordinary man who's just a captain on a Royal Navy boat, and he will be governing over parts of. So he's not a governor, he's governing over.
So Lieutenant Governor is important because
Lieutenant Governor, you've got Lieutenant Governor as a higher rank.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor in the definition is a high officer of state whose precise role and rank can vary in the various jurisdictions. So a Lieutenant Governor has a lot of power, but they've just called him governor. And if you just look up the word governor, a governor is just simply a public official. So lieutenant governor is someone that has the power of state to make laws in the state.
It's like the Governor General who we have in this country.
Yeah, exactly the same.
And some of you may not understand this, but the Governor General is the person who holds the title of office holder appointed to represent the monarch of the personal union in any sovereign state. So they're there to represent the sovereigns of that state.
Yes, and a governor is non-sovereign. A governor is non-sovereign. They're just basically people that are working in local government.
That's right, and the Governor General is a little bit higher, but not much, and it's her or his office is to be the personal union for the sovereign state, so that if we the people have any issues, we go to her and she takes it to Majesty.
And
Majesty, Queen of.
And also, in each country where you have an embassy, that embassy ground is in each country. The embassy grounds are only have to follow the laws of your country. They don't follow the laws of the country. They're separate. And they have consuls that work there and act on behalf of prime ministers and queens.
Yes.
And so that's a consul that's been removed, and all he's given him is he's only made him a captain, and then he's put the Royal Navy removed Her Majesty, which means removing Her Majesty the Queen, to be a governor, which is basically a local person that can take care of things for all parts of New Zealand. But actually, Captain Hobson, as you said, he had 3 important hats. He was a captain of the ship, but secondly, he was Her Majesty.
He was the captain of Her Majesty's Royal Navy.
Yeah, the entire Navy. Yes, the entire Navy. Yes, the entire Navy. And also the Royal Navy Consul, and also a Lieutenant Governor over the parts of New Zealand, which means he had sovereign power.
He had 3 hats, had sovereign power.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've made him, they've minimalised his power. In fact, they've removed his power and made him an ordinary man where anyone could step into his role, but they can't.
So we could be having a modern-day William Hobson living in New Zealand as we speak.
Correct.
There could actually just be a William Hobson that is a captain of any ship, in any ship. Because Royal Navy can belong to any. There are many Royal Navies in the world, you know, not only one. So it could be in regards to the Royal Navy coming from Hawaii.
Yes.
There could be a Royal Navy in Hawaii, because Hawaii has got a queen, right? So we could actually be talking about the Hawaiian queen and a man called William Hobson that lives in Hawaii, that they have made the captain of a ship, and that could be him that is governing over parts of New Zealand. So it is significant.
The interpretation and translation is vital. And this has been lost, the second treaty has been lost in translation.
Yes.
Because it's removed all of the most important words that protect and serve us, the subjects, the sovereigns of this country.
So when you put the two preambles together, you have to, how I had to do it was to dissect where they were talking about each piece. So here where he says, so the Queen's establish in the kafara, there, it's not put in the same places. And so that's why it can be very confusing when you read it. So you have to dissect it. But I did do another video where it's dissected, and it shows you in it. But I'll have to find that video to show you next time maybe. And
probably the most important thing to remember is when you're looking at this and you're cross-referencing it.
Yeah.
Note the slight change of word or the replacement or removal of the words, because every word that's been replaced or removed is of significance. Majesty is of significance. Deemed is of significance. Hereditary chiefs, native chiefs is of significance.
Yes.
The moment they take those words out, you have got a watered-down version of something you think protects you when it does not.
And right, can you see my screen there? So the second part says the Queen in the Kafaru version, the Queen of England agrees to protect the chiefs and sub-tribes and all the people of New Zealand. But in the Hobson version, it says, Her Majesty the Queen of England confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and tribes of New Zealand.
The interesting thing about the two differences between Hobson and
Kafaru. Yeah.
Kafaru. Sorry, I keep getting his name wrong. It's just making me angry. Is that he's broken it down into the first, the second, and the third on his version of his translation of this. There's no first, second, or third of anything in the original document, and that's what Kate refers to when she says it's a bit of a mismatch. So the second is referring to the Queen of England agrees to. That actually is the third paragraph of the treaty under Hobson. So when you look at the two, you can clearly see again it's been diminished quite a lot. It's been edited and amended.
Yes, quite a lot. It takes quite a lot of study. Yeah, I'm sorry to the viewers because it's quite complicated, and it does take quite a lot of study. But one of the things that I really wanted to point out to you is that where it says, where's the first article? The chiefs of the it says...
They say the chiefs of the Confederation and all the chiefs who have not joined that Confederation give absolutely to the Queen of England forever the complete government over their land.
Where are you?
And it's not...
Where are you?
That's the first.
I'm still on the preamble. No, I'm still on the preamble.
Yeah, we're on the preamble. In the Hobson one, it's the chiefs of the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand. And the Hugh one, it's the chiefs of the Confederation. And
that's not the preamble. That's starting on the articles. But one of the we're still at the preamble stops at conditions.
Okay.
And it says there, and it's ceded, maybe hereafter shall be ceded to Her Majesty to invite the Confederation and independent chiefs of New Zealand to concur in the following articles and conditions. Now, concur just means, all it means is that they should get together and talk about this. The signing of the Treaty of Waitangi did not promise anything. It only says that she has asked them to concur about these issues. And they signed it to say, we will concur, we will have discussions about it. The laws came later, 25 years later. The treaty...
And there's a reason for that.
Yes, because the Hobson were only allowed to set up a scaffolding government. And it wasn't until the actual New Zealand courts had been established that they could take any of this stuff to the courts and have it acclimated into New Zealand law. So
the native courts in 1860.
Yes, the native courts. Yes, it had to be done by the natives. This is only asking them if they will think about it. But if you look on the Kafaru version, it says the Queen has appointed me a captain in the Royal Navy to be governor over all parts of New Zealand, both those shortly to be received by the Queen. It's saying here to be received, and those to be received hereafter. And it presents to the chiefs of the confederation of the subtribes and other chiefs these laws. It says that these are laws. This is very...
And it's not saying it to the Confederation of the United Tribes of New Zealand.
And it's not saying an independent chiefs.
And it's not saying independent chiefs.
And it's not separate. And it's not saying to concur.
It's saying it's done. These laws set
These are laws are set out, and the Majesty did not say that any laws were set out.
And so in Hugh's one, it's clear that they are no longer in discussion about already setting the laws and the guidelines.
Yeah. This queen of corporation has already set the laws, and here they are, and you will follow them.
And so what they're saying in the Hugh one is that this is done and dusted. It's been agreed to. We've had conversations. But in the original, it's in discussion.
Yeah.
It's to continue to be in discussion.
Yes.
And then we will come back, because that's what I do concur. I do want to
they have to come back and say, I do concur. This is just saying that they're going to have discussions.
Yes.
And so this is very important. And
I'm going to pop out for a minute, Kate. Carry on.
And so that is very important. And then it says, what it says here is that it says to be governor over the parts of New Zealand, both of these shortly to be received by the Queen of corporation, and those to be received hereafter. And then so it says that this Queen is going to receive these lands and is going to receive later these lands. But in here it only says to have authority over parts of these lands, and it doesn't say and for governance, but it doesn't say any receivership of any lands whatsoever. Are you with me, Kim?
I am.
Did you hear what I said?
Could you just repeat that, please?
So in the Kafaru version, it says, has appointed me to be governor of all the part. The Queen has appointed me to be governor of New Zealand for both those for lands shortly to be received by the Queen and those to be received after.
Yes.
But on the Hobson version, it only talks about that she will establish an authority over the land, no receivership of any lands whatsoever.
No.
And it says that she will be desirous to establish a settled form of governance. It doesn't say that she will take a single inch of land.
No, she's saying that she'll listen, she'll take on board, and she'll continue to advise, but she's not going to take any control.
She'll take control of the governance, but she's not taking the lands.
That's what I meant. She's not taking the land.
But
she's going to give them the tools to be able to continue to govern.
Yes.
themselves, but she will be there as their safety net for guidance.
Exactly, but on the Kafaru version, it says that they're going to receive the lands and that there will be to be received hereafter. And in the Kafaru version, it just says the queen receives all those things and then presents to the chiefs of the Confederation, chiefs of the sub-tribes of New Zealand and other chiefs, these laws set out here, whereas she says that Her Majesty's Royal Consul and Lieutenant of such parts of New Zealand as may be or hereafter shall be ceded to Her Majesty to invite the confederated and independent chiefs to concur in the following.
Exactly, that's what we were saying. Concur means to continue conversations, to come back to the table and continue discussions. It's not set in stone, it's a continuance.
Exactly, and you can almost, on the Kafaru version, it says, to the end their chiefs will agree to the Queen's government over all parts of this land and adjoining islands, and also because there are many of her subjects already living on this. Oh, no. I'm trying to see how it says, the Queen has appointed me, William Hobson, a captain in the room, to be governor of all parts of New Zealand, both those shortly to be received and those to be received here. So that means she's receiving the lands.
They're saying that, they're pretty much saying that they're going to be governed, they've already decided this is what they've agreed to, and it's set in law.
Yeah. And then when we go to the article,